The snow had started falling again in the north. It was cold, cruel, and endless, just like the memories of the Stark family. Jon Snow stood at the top of the wall in Castle Black, looking out into the dark forest. His black cloak danced in the wind, but his mind was far away. He wasn't thinking about the White Walkers or the Night's Watch today. No, he was thinking about King's Landing. He was thinking about Joffrey Baratheon. A letter had arrived. It was short and full of pride, sealed with gold. King Joffrey celebrates the peace of the realm. All rebels have been crushed. The false King Robb Stark is dead. The traitor Snow may return if he bends the knee. Jon crushed the letter in his hand. Robb, his brother, dead. Not just dead, murdered at the Red Wedding, a trap set by the Freys and Lannisters. And the monster sitting on the Iron Throne had laughed about it. Far away in the Riverlands, a few old Stark bannermen still held on to their honor. Grey Wind's howl was gone. Catelyn's screams were just a memory, but one man still carried the fire of revenge. Jon Snow. He had left the wall without permission, riding south with only a few loyal brothers at first. But as word spread across the land that a Stark was returning, old houses who had once sworn to Robb quietly opened their doors. The Boltons were gone, thanks to Jon and Sansa. The Freys were hunted down one by one. Arya had taken care of that, but Joffrey still lived, safe in his golden palace, behind Lannister guards and lies. King's Landing was quiet that morning, too quiet. Inside the Red Keep, Joffrey sat on the Iron Throne, legs crossed, sipping wine like a child pretending to be a man. His face still held that cruel smile, the one that had mocked Ned Stark in front of the crowd, that had laughed when Sansa begged for her father's life, that had ordered the death of Robb Stark, calling it a wedding gift. He never saw the shadow coming, but others did. Varys, the spider, whispered through his little birds, "The North has not forgotten. Jon Snow marches." And he is not alone. Tyrion heard it too. And though he had his own problems to worry about, he couldn't help but smile a little. That boy's wrath will be something even the gods will fear. By the time Jon reached the gates of King's Landing, he wasn't alone anymore. The banners of the North, the Vale, and even a few river lords followed him. And riding beside him was Robb Stark, not a ghost, not a lie. Robb, alive. He had survived barely, hidden by a bannerman who betrayed the Freys in secret. Wounded, broken, but not dead. For years, he had healed in the shadows, waiting for the day he could come back. Now that day had arrived. When Jon and Robb rode side by side into the capital, the people cheered, not for their king, but for the Starks. Joffrey's face turned pale when he heard the names. "Robb Stark is dead," he shouted at the council. But the truth had a way of breaking lies into dust. No longer the scared boys of Winterfell, Jon and Robb were warriors now. And they had not come to kneel. They had come for justice, and Joffrey Baratheon was out of time. The city hadn't seen this kind of silence in years. As Jon and Robb rode through the streets of King's Landing, people stopped whatever they were doing. The bakers left their ovens, the beggars rose from the alleys, and even the gold cloaks seemed unsure of what to do. The direwolf banners waved again, something no one thought they'd ever see after the Red Wedding. Beside Jon, Robb didn't smile. His eyes were hard, colder than the winter wind. He had seen too much pain, too much death. His once clean face was now rough with scars, and his voice carried weight. "A wolf who had been hurt but never tamed will speak to the people first," Robb said. "Let them know the truth." "We don't need to spill blood yet," Jon nodded. But in his heart, he knew blood was coming. Inside the Red Keep, Joffrey paced back and forth like a trapped animal. His golden crown sat crooked on his head, and his hands were shaking. He tried to act like a king, but fear had already eaten into him. "They can't just ride into the city like that," he shouted. "I'm the king!" Cersei was sitting nearby, a goblet of wine in her hand, eyes half glazed. "You've made too many enemies, Joffrey," she muttered. "You killed Ned Stark. You laughed at his daughter. You fed lies to the realm, and now the North has come to collect. I am the rightful king." Joffrey barked again, his voice cracking. "No, boy. said Jaime, walking into the room slowly, golden hand glinting in the light. "You're just another Lannister who thought no one would ever bite back." Joffrey stared at his uncle. "You're supposed to protect me." Jaime stepped closer. "I protected you from others, but I can't protect you from what you've done." Outside the Red Keep, Jon stood before a massive crowd. People whispered his name like a prayer. They hadn't forgotten Ned Stark. They hadn't forgotten how he was killed like a traitor for protecting the truth. And now his bastard son stood before them, not a boy anymore, but a man shaped by fire and snow. He raised his hand, and the crowd went quiet. "Years ago," Jon began, "my father, Eddard Stark, came to this city seeking justice. Instead he found betrayal. People murmured he was murdered. My brother Robb Stark was slaughtered at a wedding. His wife stabbed, his mother killed. His body mocked. The Freys and Lannisters called it victory, but I call it what it truly was: cowardice." The people were listening. Even the ones who had once cheered for Joffrey now kept their heads down. "And now," Jon said louder, "we are here, not for war, but for truth. We demand the one who ordered the death of the king in the north. The boy who called himself king and wore my father's death like a trophy." Someone in the crowd shouted, "Joffrey!" Robb stepped forward now. The people gasped. Many thought he was a ghost. "I was dead to the world," Robb said. "But death couldn't hold me. I rose for one reason: to see justice done." Suddenly a group of gold cloaks stepped forward, their weapons raised. But they didn't attack. They knelt, one by one. More soldiers joined them, lowering their swords. They were done fighting for a boy king who had brought only shame and blood. Inside the Red Keep, Joffrey watched from the window. His lips trembled. "They're turning on me," he whispered. Cersei stood up slowly, walked to him, and slapped him hard across the face. Joffrey stumbled back, shocked. "That's for everything," she said, cold and calm. "I raised a monster." Joffrey turned and ran, through the hallways, down the stairs, into the darkest corners of the castle. His crown fell off somewhere behind him. His royal robes dragged in the dust. He was not a king anymore. He was just a scared boy. But the wolves were already inside the gates. Jon and Robb marched through the Red Keep's main doors. The Lannister banners were being torn down as they walked. Every step echoed like judgment. "I want him alive," Jon said. "No," Robb replied. "I want him to face us first." And in the dungeons below, Joffrey found nowhere left to hide. He backed into a dark corner, only to turn and see two shadows waiting, both carrying the face of the North. One cold as ice, the other burning with fire. Jon Snow, Robb Stark. Joffrey opened his mouth to scream, but no one came to help him, and the door closed behind them. The torchlight flickered off the cold stone walls of the dungeon, casting long, dancing shadows. The smell of damp rot hung heavy in the air. Joffrey stumbled backward, tripping over the hem of his royal robes. His back hit the wall as he stared at Jon Snow and Robb Stark, both of them silent, both of them still. Their eyes locked on him like wolves eyeing a cornered rabbit. Please," Joffrey stuttered, voice breaking. "You have no right to be here. I'm the king. I am—" "Shut your mouth," Robb said, stepping forward. Jon didn't move. He just looked at Joffrey. Really looked. The same way you look at something that's not even human anymore. His sword remained sheathed. He didn't need it, not yet. "Do you know how it feels," Jon finally said, voice low, "to hear your father was murdered as a traitor while you're trapped at the edge of the world? To get a raven saying your brother's body was paraded with a wolf's head stitched to it?" Joffrey shook his head wildly. "I didn't. I didn't stitch anything. That was the phrase. I was just a boy. Robb laughed bitterly. "You signed the letters. You sent the orders. You smiled while we died. Don't tell me you were just a boy. You were a butcher wearing a golden crown." "I was the king," Joffrey shouted, sudden anger flaring. "I ruled the 7 kingdoms. I had the power of life and death." Jon stepped closer. "And now you'll understand both." Joffrey's eyes darted toward the stairway. 2 guards stood there, Stark men, not Lannister. He had no way out. His golden crown, the one he wore like a toy, had been left behind. All he had now were his words, and even they were turning into stammers. I'll give you gold, he whispered, voice suddenly soft, like a coward bargaining with a hangman. You want revenge? Fine, take it. But please let me go. Exile me, I'll disappear. I swear it. John's face didn't change. Robb stepped even closer. Let you go? After what you did to Sansa? After what you did to our mother? My wife? His voice cracked. You murdered my family and called it a gift? I was told to. Joffrey blurted. Tywin gave the orders. He said it was smart. He said it would end the war. Jon raised his voice now, finally. Tywin Lannister is already dead, poisoned by his own blood. But you're the last piece of the sickness that killed the North. Robb turned and looked at Jon. He deserves to die screaming. Jon didn't answer right away. He looked at Joffrey again, this snivelling, pathetic thing in front of them. He remembered the boy who ordered Ned's execution like it was sport. He remembered Sansa's bruises. He remembered hearing about Robb's headless body, but still, killing a helpless man, even this one, didn't feel like justice. Not yet, no, Jon said. He doesn't die today. Robb looked shocked. What do you mean? Jon knelt down to Joffrey's level. He's going to live just long enough to feel what we felt. He'll sit in a cold cell. No servants, no crown, no title. Just him and his guilt. And then, when the realm sees what he truly is, when he's nothing but a naked, weeping coward, we'll give him what he gave our father. Joffrey's lips trembled. Please. Jon, Robb. I'm sorry. I was just doing what they told me. Robb stared for a long moment, then spat on the floor beside him. You're not sorry. You're scared. That's all you've ever been. They turned and left the dungeon. The door slammed shut behind them. For the first time in his life, Joffrey was alone with nothing. No crown, no guards, no family, just the stone, the silence, and the weight of everything he'd done. Above the dungeons, the news spread fast. Joffrey Baratheon had fallen. The people of King's Landing cheered. They threw fruit at Lannister banners. They chanted for justice. And in the north, the bells rang for the Starks, not for war this time, but for a strange, quiet peace. A peace earned by blood, and long overdue. That night, Jon stood on the Red Keep's highest tower. He watched the stars. Winter was still far from over, but something deep inside him had thawed. We didn't kill him, Robb said, joining him. Not yet, Jon replied. Let him rot. Let him know what it's like to be powerless. Robb nodded. The North remembers. Jon stared at the horizon. And we never forget. It had been 3 days since Joffrey Baratheon, once the self-proclaimed king of the Seven Kingdoms, was thrown into the darkness of the Red Keep's lowest dungeon. 3 days without silk pillows, without gold cups, without servants bowing before him like he was something divine. Now he sat in the corner of a damp stone cell, dressed in rags, scratching at flea bites and whispering to himself. The boy, who had once fed Sansa's brother to dogs for sport, now ate scraps tossed in by guards who looked at him with nothing but disgust. Please, he whispered, throat dry. I'm the king, but no one answered. The rats didn't kneel. Meanwhile, above the dungeons, the real world had moved on. Jon Snow had taken command of the city for now. Not as a king. He didn't want the Iron Throne, not even with the people begging him to take it. He had seen what power did to men. He wanted something different, justice, not a crown. Robb, on the other hand, was silent. He spent hours walking through the city, wearing no armor, no cloak. People stared in awe, a dead man walking among them. But he said little. His eyes were fixed on the past, on the pain, and on what came next. In the Great Hall, the lords had gathered, the surviving lords of the Vale, the Riverlands, the Reach, even a few from the Stormlands, had come to witness the fall of the Lannisters. They stood now before the Iron Throne, stripped of its Lannister colours, guarded by men wearing the direwolf of House Stark. Jon stood at the foot of the throne. We are not here to claim power, he told them. We're here to fix what was broken. And who rules now? Asked Lord Royce of the Vale. The North has marched into the capital. The last king is in chains. The people cry your name. I don't want a throne, Jon replied. I want peace. I want the houses to choose their leaders. I want the blood to stop spilling. An old lady from House Tarley leaned on her cane. And what of the boy king rotting in your dungeons? Robb stepped forward now. He'll face a trial. In front of the realm. Let the people see what he is. And then we'll let them decide. Murmurs spread through the hall. A trial for Joffrey Baratheon, a public one. The boy who once ordered executions like they were birthday gifts would now stand and answer for them. Back in his cell, Joffrey scratched a tally mark into the wall with a dirty spoon. He had counted every hour, every minute. His fingernails were black with grime. His blonde hair, once brushed with rose oils, hung greasy and matted. His eyes were red, puffy from crying. He had begged the guards, offered them riches, lands, even titles. But they only laughed. Your gold means nothing now, one said. The wolves own this city. He didn't understand. He had been the king. He had ruled. He had shouted, ordered, punished, killed. And now he was nothing more than a sad little boy in a hole in the ground. Worse than the rats was the silence. No screaming crowd, no trumpets, no mother, no Cersei. She hadn't come. She hadn't even sent a message. Had she abandoned him? Was she dead? He didn't know. And that was the worst part. Up above, in Sansa's old chambers, now cleaned and opened again, Arya Stark arrived quietly through the night. She had been riding for days, hearing the rumors. Jon greeted her with a quiet hug. Robb's eyes softened for the first time in weeks when he saw her. You came, Robb said. I never left, Arya replied. Not really. They sat together that night. 3 Stark children. No longer innocent, no longer naive, but alive. He's afraid, Jon said. I've seen it in his eyes. Good, Arya whispered. But he hasn't paid yet. No, Robb said. But he will. That night across Westeros, word spread like wildfire. Joffrey Baratheon would face a public trial in King's Landing. No more quiet poisonings. No backroom stabbings. No lies whispered into ears. This time the people would watch. The whole realm would see the truth, and Joffrey would finally feel the same fear he once poured onto others like wine. The great sept of Baelor had never been this full, not even during coronations or royal weddings. Not even when Joffrey had stood here once in golden armor, grinning like a spoiled lion cub, pretending to be a king. But today, the benches were filled not with nobles come to praise, but with lords, ladies, and common folk who had come to judge. At the center of the sept stood a raised platform. On it, chained at the wrists, dressed in rags, stood Joffrey Baratheon. He didn't look like a king anymore. His cheeks were hollow, lips chapped, eyes sunken. His hair, once brushed to shine in the sun, hung greasy around his face. His hands shook as he looked around the room. He didn't recognize it anymore. He didn't recognize this world. At the front stood Jon Snow, dressed in dark leathers, the direwolf sigil across his chest. Robb sat beside him, stiff, eyes cold and unreadable. Arya stood near the side wall, leaning against a pillar, arms crossed. Her face was calm, but her stare could have cut stone. The High Septon stepped forward, acting as the neutral voice of the trial. His voice echoed across the marble walls. Joffrey Baratheon, once king of the 7 kingdoms, stands accused of murder, cruelty, and war crimes against the realm. The people shall bear witness. The accused may speak, and so may the witnesses. Let truth judge where blood once ruled. Joffrey swallowed hard. I was the king, he said, voice shaking. I did what I had to do to protect the realm. A loud murmur rose in the crowd. Laughter, disbelief. The first witness was Sansa Stark. She walked slowly to the center, dressed in grey and white, strong, composed, no longer the frightened girl Joffrey used to hurt for amusement. Do you remember me, Joffrey? She asked, voice calm but sharp. Joffrey looked down. I remember you smiling when my father was executed, she said. I remember how you made me look at his head, how you hit me when I cried. I remember you calling my brother a traitor, while you hid behind your mother. Sansa, you broke me, she said simply. But I'm not broken anymore. You are. The sept was silent as she walked back. Joffrey didn't look up. Next came Tyrion Lannister. Gasps filled the room as he walked in, limping slightly, his eyes sharp and full of fire. You look smaller than I remember, Tyrion said, sneering. You dare— Oh, I dare, Tyrion interrupted. You made a fool of this throne. You played king like a child playing with wildfire. You murdered because it made you feel powerful. You tortured because no one stopped you. I was the king." "No," Tyrion said. "You were a scared little boy playing at power while your mother wiped your tears in the dark." The crowd erupted in whispers. "And I'll say it clearly," Tyrion added. "You were the worst thing that ever happened to this city." He turned and left the stand. The trial went on. Lady Brienne of Tarth spoke of how Joffrey laughed at the death of Renly Baratheon. Davos Seaworth gave testimony of the chaos and fire Joffrey had caused during Stannis' attack. Even small folk were brought in, bakers, butchers, who told stories of public beatings, of heads on spikes, of orders carried out in Joffrey's name. By the end of it, no one in the room could pretend anymore. No one could deny who Joffrey really was. Just a boy, but not a child. A boy raised by wolves in lionskin. When it was Jon's turn to speak, he said only this: "My father died because of this boy's lies. My brother was butchered because of this throne. But we're not here to get revenge. We're here to show the world what happens when cruelty wears a crown. No more lies, no more games. The North remembers, and now so will the rest of you." The final judgment was left to the people. The High Septon stepped forward. "All those who believe Joffrey Baratheon is guilty, raise your voice." The echo that followed was deafening. Thousands roared, "Guilty!" And Joffrey, once proud, once untouchable, collapsed to his knees, weeping, not from pain, from fear. For the first time in his life, he truly understood what it meant to have no power. The echoes of guilty still clung to the walls of the sept like smoke. Jon stood in the middle of it all, unmoving, while Joffrey lay curled on the cold stone floor, sobbing like a child who had just realized the world no longer feared him. Robb didn't look at Joffrey. Not once. His eyes were scanning the faces in the crowd. Some wanted blood, others wanted peace. But justice? That was harder to define now. Because even though they had won, the question that haunted every eye in the sept was, what now? The High Septon spoke once more, his voice grave. "The realm has spoken. Joffrey Baratheon is guilty of crimes against the crown, against the North, and against the innocent. The right of punishment now falls to the Starks of Winterfell, the family who lost the most." Everyone turned. All eyes were on Jon, Robb, and Arya. There was no crown on Jon's head, no throne behind Robb, no sword drawn in Arya's hand, but somehow they felt like rulers in that moment, not by title, but by truth. Jon looked at his brother and sister. "We need to talk." In private, they left the sept in silence, while the crowd murmured like waves crashing on distant rocks. The room they gathered in was once Cersei's private chamber. Her perfume still lingered faintly, sour and sweet. The windows were thrown open to the wind, but it didn't blow away the weight pressing on the siblings now. Arya broke the silence first. "We kill him, simple." Robb didn't answer immediately. He poured himself a glass of water but didn't drink. "I want to. 7 hells. I want to cut his head off myself." "But would that make us like him?" Arya frowned. "So what? He murdered our family, mocked their deaths, laughed while Sansa begged. He deserves the sword." Jon sat down slowly. "He deserves worse than death." Arya's eyes narrowed. "Then what? Let him rot." "No," Jon said, voice firm. "We make him live, but not as a king, not even as a prisoner." Robb looked over. "What are you thinking?" Jon stood, walking toward the open window, staring out at the city, the same city that once cheered Joffrey's name. "I want him exiled," Jon said. "Not just sent away, banished from the 7 kingdoms. He lives out his days as a nameless, powerless man. No gold, no crown, no friends, no family," Arya scoffed. "That's merciful." "No," Jon replied, "it's not. He's always had power, even when he didn't deserve it. Take that away and leave him with only his shame. That's worse than a clean death." Robb was quiet. Then he nodded. "Let him carry the weight. Every day he breathes, he'll know the North still stands." "And he doesn't." Arya didn't argue again. She just turned to the door. "Then let's make it official." Back in the sept, the crowd waited. Joffrey, barely able to stand, looked up as the Stark siblings returned. His eyes were red, His lips moved, trying to form words, but fear had dried his tongue. Jon raised his voice. "We have reached our decision." The sept went silent. "Joffrey Baratheon will not be executed. Death would be a mercy, and you showed none of it in your life. You will be exiled from the 7 kingdoms, stripped of your name, your claim, your rights, and your gold. You will live as a man with no crown, no guards, no voice." Joffrey began shaking his head. No, please." Robb stepped forward, eyes locked on the boy who once wore a crown. "You will leave tonight, escorted by Stark guards, and be left at the edge of Essos. If you return to Westeros, your death will be instant. If you try to use your name, you will be silenced. Your life belongs to no one now, not even you." The people didn't cheer. They didn't need to. The silence was heavier than any applause. And in that silence, Joffrey Baratheon died, not by sword, but by shame. 2 guards stepped forward and lifted him. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He just cried quietly, like a child lost in a nightmare he couldn't wake from. As he was dragged out of the sept, he passed by Arya. She leaned in and whispered, "You lived like a monster. Now live like a ghost." And Joffrey Baratheon was gone. The dawn after Joffrey's exile was a strange one. For the first time in years, no lion flew over the Red Keep. The crimson banners bearing the golden stag and lion were gone, burned quietly before sunrise. In their place, a grey direwolf on a white field waved from the highest tower, but not as a symbol of conquest, as a reminder. The wolves had returned, not to rule but to remember. Still, the city didn't know what to do with itself. The streets were quiet, uncertain. Some whispered that the Lannisters would strike back. Others feared a power vacuum. But most were just tired. The people had seen fire and madness. They had watched kings fall and queens burn. And now, with Joffrey gone and no one on the Iron Throne, they looked to the north for guidance, even though the north had never wanted to lead. In the small council chamber, the tension was thick. "We can't just leave," said Robb, pacing the stone floor. "If we walk away now, someone worse will crawl out of the shadows. The throne doesn't stay empty for long." Jon stood near the window, arms crossed. "We didn't come to take the crown, but someone has to," said Ser Davos, seated nearby. "And the people already look to you, Jon. You gave them justice when their own king gave them fear." "I'm not a king," Jon said, tired. "I never wanted it." "You may not want it," said Sansa, entering the room. "But the realm might need you anyway." All heads turned. She walked with the grace of a queen already, not just in her posture, but in her clarity. She had grown into something powerful, not through blood, but through pain, through fire, through surviving people like Joffrey, Ramsay, Littlefinger. And now she stood taller than them all. "You saw what happened," she continued. "No one protested Joffrey's exile. No one defended the Lannisters. Westeros is tired of fear. They want someone they can trust." Jon shook his head. "And you think that's me?" "I think it could be either of us," she said. "But someone must stand up before another tyrant does." Robb finally stopped pacing. "Then maybe it's time we gave them a council instead of a crown. A group of houses, North, Riverlands, Reach, Stormlands, Dawn, all equal. No more one throne. No more one ruler." Sansa looked at him, surprised. "You'd trust the other kingdoms to rule themselves?" "We either trust them," Robb replied, "or we spend our lives conquering them." Davos nodded slowly. "It's not the old way, but maybe the old way has died with the boy king." Jon looked between them. He saw what his father had once tried to do, bring peace to a world that only knew steel and fire. And now that burden had quietly passed to him, but something in his heart still resisted. That night, Jon walked alone through the streets of King's Landing. No guards, no cloak, just a man in black walking through the city of kings. He passed beggars, mothers holding hungry children, blacksmiths hammering in silence, old men muttering about dragons and ghosts. And still they looked at him with hope. Not fear, that scared him more than anything. In the ruins of the dragon pit he found Arya. She sat on the edge of the broken wall, staring up at the stars. "You still thinking of sailing west?" John asked, sitting beside her. One day, she replied. But not yet. They sat in silence for a while. The wind carried the smell of fire, but also something else, freedom. What do you think? John finally asked. Arya shrugged. You're not a king. You never wanted to be. But maybe that's exactly why you should be. He laughed softly. You sound like Robb. I sound like Arya, she said. And Arya thinks the world needs someone who's not craving power. Someone who's already lost everything and still chooses to protect people. John looked at her, eyes heavy. Would you stay? He asked. Arya smiled faintly. For now. I want to see what happens next. And that was the truth, because what came next would either unite the realm or break it all over again. The Iron Throne was gone, not burned, not destroyed, removed. At Jon's order, the blades were taken apart. The twisted steel melted down by blacksmiths from Winterfell and the Reach. The throne that had caused so much bloodshed was now scattered across Westeros as swords for the people, not symbols of power, but protection, and in its place a round stone table now sat in the center of the great hall, no one above. No one below, no king, only voices. A new system had begun. Slow, imperfect, but something different from the centuries of rule by sword. Every major house would send one voice to the council. The North would remain independent, as Queen Sansa of Winterfell had already made clear. But they would still hold a seat, still help shape the future of Westeros. Robb was named Warden of the Riverlands, restoring House Stark's honor and protecting the lands that had bled so much for their cause. He accepted it with quiet dignity, though his heart remained in the north. Arya didn't stay for the ceremony. She left the night before the council was formed, riding out toward the coast, where a ship waited. She didn't want thrones, councils, or history books. I want to find out what's west of Westeros, she had told Jon, and maybe who I really am. When I'm not a Stark, a killer, or someone else's shadow. He had hugged her tightly before she left. You'll always be Arya Stark, he whispered. But now you get to choose what that means. And she rode off. Never looking back, Jon stayed longer than he planned. Each day, the council asked him to stay, to lead, to guide. Each day, he politely refused. He didn't belong in polished rooms, sitting on chairs and reading scrolls. He didn't want applause or a statue. He wanted what few in Westeros ever found, peace. It was only when the snow began to fall in the south, rare and quiet, that he finally made his choice. One morning, Sansa found him standing at the gates of the Red Keep, his sword strapped across his back, his cloak dusted with frost. You're going back, aren't you? She asked. To the wall? He said. No, beyond it. To the true north. Sansa looked confused. There's nothing left there. Jon gave a soft smile. That's why I'm going. He explained it gently, that he wanted no titles, no legacy. Just a quiet life among the free folk, rebuilding something honest. The wall didn't need a Lord Commander anymore. But maybe it needed a brother again. You were the only one who never wanted power, she said. And that's why everyone wanted you to have it. He looked at her, proud. You'll be a better queen than any of them ever were. Sansa blinked back tears. And you'll be the only king the North will ever remember, even if you never wore a crown. He hugged her, kissed her forehead, and left without ceremony. No parades. No speeches, just a man on a horse riding into the cold, back into the place where it all began. And as for Joffrey Baratheon, few remembered him. His exile was not glorious. He was shipped to Essos, under guard, and dropped at the edge of a forgotten coast, with nothing but a name that no one dared speak. He tried for a while to reclaim his power, tried to convince merchants and mercenaries that he was a true king, but power does not listen to beggars. In the end, he was seen begging for food in a Braavosi alley, a broken man with yellow teeth and a bent back, shouting stories about a throne made of swords and how he once ruled it all. People laughed at him. Some pitied him. Others threw stones, but no one followed. And one cold night during a storm, he was found face down in the mud outside the city walls. No coin in his pocket. No name on his tongue. Just another forgotten soul, claimed by the very world he once thought he ruled. Back in Westeros, a monument stood quietly near Winterfell, not a statue, not a tower, just a carved stone. It read, "The North remembers." And we choose not to forget, for justice lives not in crowns, but in those who carry the truth. And sometimes, in the dead of night, when the snow was falling heavy and the wolves were howling in the distance, people said you could hear a whisper in the wind, a whisper that said winter came, and justice came with it.